Since when do we serve animals at this counter?
Malcolm looked up.
What did you just say?
Äppling bit of the Bewodens, Connor.
Elijah stood up.
We paid for this meal, just like everybody.
With what? Food stamps? Welfare check? Or did you steal that wallet too?
He shoved Malcolm's coffee off the table. Ceramic hit the floor.
Get out before I put you where you belong.
Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. And a cop who had no idea he just put handcuffs on his own career. Because in 4 minutes, 6 black SUVs would pull into that parking lot. And nothing in this man's life would ever be the same. Now let me take you back. About 2 hours before that coffee hit the floor. Mid-September, Virginia back roads. The kind of morning where the sun sits low and golden, and the air still carries that last bit of summer heat. Malcolm Owens was behind the wheel of a rented gray Nissan. Nothing fancy, nothing flashy. That was the point. The man had just been confirmed as the new United States Attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia, one of the most powerful federal prosecutors in the country. His face had been on C-SPAN for about 11 seconds during the Senate vote. Nobody outside of Washington would recognize him on the street, and that's exactly how he wanted this morning to go. Sitting next to him was his younger brother Elijah, 38, high school football coach, built like he could still play. Elijah had driven up from North Carolina the night before so they could spend one last morning together before Malcolm's life became press conferences and security briefings. Their mother's house was 2 hours behind them. The federal courthouse in Richmond was an hour ahead. And right now, the only thing between the two brothers was a gospel playlist and a whole lot of trash talk. "You really wearing that shirt to your first day?" Elijah said, tugging at Malcolm's collar. "You look like a substitute teacher. And you look like you slept in your car." "I did sleep in my car. Mom gave my room to her sewing machine." Malcolm laughed. A real laugh, the kind that loosens your shoulders and makes your eyes water. He hadn't laughed like that in weeks. Confirmation hearings don't leave much room for joy. The windows were cracked, wind mixed with the smell of fresh-cut grass from the farms rolling past. Elijah scrolled through his phone looking for a breakfast spot. He found one with 4 stars and a photo of biscuits the size of a fist. Loretta's Griddle, 15 minutes off the highway. Reviews say best pancakes in the county. Malcolm checked the mirror. His security detail, 6 black Suburbans carrying 12 U.S. Marshals, was supposed to be right behind him. But he'd asked them to hang back. Told Special Agent Dana Sutton he wanted one quiet morning with his brother. No earpieces, no formation, just 2 guys getting pancakes. Sutton didn't love the idea, but she agreed. They'd follow 15 minutes behind. 15 minutes. Remember that number. They pulled off Route 58 and into the gravel lot of Loretta's Griddle, a small roadside diner in Barlow, Virginia. Population around 4,800. The kind of town where everybody knows everybody's truck. The diner looked like it hadn't changed since the 80s. Checkered floor, red vinyl booths, a handwritten specials board behind the register. The smell of bacon grease and burnt coffee hit them before the screen door even closed. A little bell rang when they walked in. A few heads turned. Truckers at the counter, an older couple in a corner booth, a woman refilling ketchup bottles. The looks weren't hostile, but they were long. 2 black men in a town like Barlow, people noticed. Malcolm and Elijah sat in a booth by the window. Loretta Gibbons, the owner, white, mid-60s, reading glasses on a chain around her neck, came over with 2 menus and a pot of coffee. "Morning, fellas, what can I get you?" 2 stacks of pancakes, side of bacon, eggs scrambled. Malcolm smiled. "And keep that coffee coming." Loretta nodded. Professional, maybe a little stiff around the edges, but polite. She poured 2 cups and headed back to the kitchen. For about 12 minutes, everything was perfect. Elijah was telling a story about one of his players who ran the wrong way during a scrimmage. Malcolm nearly choked on his bacon laughing. Then the bell above the door rang again. A Barlow County Sheriff's cruiser had pulled into the lot. Deputy Russell Crawford walked in like he owned the building. Tall, mid-50s, belt loaded with gear. The regulars nodded at him. This was clearly his diner, his town, his morning routine. He ordered black coffee at the counter, took a sip. Then his eyes drifted to the window booth. He stared at Malcolm and Elijah the way a dog stares at something it doesn't recognize in its yard. His partner, Deputy Kyle Brennan, late 20s, eager eyes, trying too hard, walked in behind him. Crawford leaned over and muttered something. Brennan glanced at the booth, smirked. And just like that, the best morning Malcolm Owens had in months was about to become the worst. Crawford didn't sit down with his coffee. He didn't go to his usual stool. He picked up the mug, took a slow sip, and walked straight toward the window booth. He didn't introduce himself, didn't show a badge number, didn't say good morning. He just stood over them, close enough that his belt buckle was at the edge of the table, and looked down like he was inspecting something stuck to the bottom of his boot. "You boys from around here?" Malcolm set his fork down, wiped his mouth with a napkin. He already knew what this was. He'd known since the moment that cruiser pulled into the lot. "Just passing through," Malcolm said, calm, even. "Having breakfast." "Passing through," Crawford repeated it slowly like the words tasted bad. "From where? To where?" "Is that relevant, officer?" Crawford tilted his head. The diner was quiet now, not the comfortable kind of quiet, the kind where people stop chewing because they can feel something about to happen. "I'll decide what's relevant. I'm asking you a question." Elijah looked up from his plate. "Is there a problem?" Crawford didn't even glance at him, kept his eyes locked on Malcolm. "We've had a string of break-ins in this county, 3 in the last month. So when I see faces I don't recognize, I like to ask questions. Now here's what you need to know. There were no break-ins, not 3, not 1. The Barlow County dispatch logs for the entire month of September would later confirm 0 reported burglaries. Crawford made it up on the spot, a lie he'd probably used 100 times before on 100 different blackfaces passing through his town. Malcolm knew he couldn't prove that standing in a diner booth. So he did what black men in America have been trained to do since childhood. He stayed calm and kept his voice below the line that gives a man like Crawford an excuse. "We're just eating, officer. Pancakes and coffee, that's all." Crawford leaned in, put one hand flat on the table. His wedding ring clinked against the surface. "This is a family establishment. We like to keep things comfortable for the regulars. You understand what I'm saying?" "I understand what you're implying," Malcolm said quietly, "and I'd like to finish my breakfast." Something shifted in Crawford's face, a tightening, a flash behind the eyes that said, "Nobody talks back to me in this room." He wasn't used to hearing no, especially not from somebody who looked like Malcolm. He straightened up, hooked both thumbs into his belt. "Finish up, fast, and then I want you gone." Elijah's grip tightened on his fork. "You can't just—" Malcolm touched his brother's arm under the table. A small press. "Not now." Elijah went quiet, but his jaw was clenched so hard you could see the muscles moving under his skin. Crawford turned to Brennan, who had positioned himself near the front door. Not blocking it exactly, but standing there with his hand resting on his belt. The meaning was clear. You leave when we say you leave. A woman 3 booths over gathered her purse and her daughter and walked out without finishing her meal. She didn't look at anyone on the way out. The bell above the door rang behind her. Loretta watched from behind the counter. She was gripping a dish towel with both hands, wringing it over and over. She knew this was wrong. You could see it in the way her mouth pressed into a thin line, the way she kept glancing at the phone on the wall. But she didn't pick it up. She didn't say a word. Nobody did. Crawford let 30 seconds pass. Then he came back, this time louder. "I thought I told you two to wrap it up." "We're still eating," Malcolm said, gesturing at his plate. Half a stack of pancakes, scrambled eggs barely touched. "You can see that." "What I see," Crawford said, planting himself at the edge of the booth again, is two guys who don't seem to understand how things work around here. He pulled out a small notepad, clicked a pen. I'm gonna need to see some ID, both of you. Malcolm looked at him steadily. Are we being detained? I'm conducting a routine inquiry. On what grounds? Crawford's pen stopped clicking. I just told you. Break-ins in the area. Unfamiliar faces. That's my grounds. With all due respect, officer, that's not probable cause. We're under no legal obligation to show identification unless we're being formally detained for a specific crime. The temperature in that diner dropped 10 degrees. Not literally, but you could feel it. The trucker at the counter hunched lower over his plate. The older couple in the corner pretended to read their menus for the third time. Crawford stared at Malcolm for a long 5 seconds. Then he smiled. Not a warm smile, the kind of smile that says, I'm going to enjoy this. All right, then. He stepped back, keyed his radio. The static crackle cut through the silence like a knife. Dispatch, this is Crawford. I need a registration check on a vehicle in the Loretta's Griddle lot. Gray Nissan sedan. He read the plate number out loud, slowly, every digit, loud enough for every person in that diner to hear. He wanted them to hear. He wanted Malcolm and Elijah to understand. This is what happens when you don't do what I tell you. Brennan moved from the door and walked to the window. He cupped his hands against the glass and peered out at the rental car like it was evidence in a crime scene. Rental plates, Brennan said over his shoulder. Crawford raised an eyebrow. Rental. Interesting. He turned back to Malcolm. Who rents a car to drive through Barlow, Virginia? What are you really doing here? Getting pancakes, Elijah said flatly. Which are getting cold, by the way. Crawford ignored him. Completely. Like Elijah wasn't even in the room. He kept his eyes on Malcolm. I'm going to ask you one more time. Nice and polite. ID now. Malcolm held the stare. He didn't reach for his wallet. He didn't raise his voice. But something was happening behind his eyes. A calculation. Every black man in America knows the math. How much do I push? How much do I give? What does it cost me either way? He reached into his back pocket, pulled out his wallet, slid his driver's license across the table. Elijah hesitated, then did the same. Crawford picked up both IDs between 2 fingers, held them up to the light like he was checking for counterfeits. Malcolm Owens, Virginia. Elijah Owens, North Carolina. He looked between them. Brothers? Yes. And where were you two before this? Our mother's house. Crawford wrote something in his notepad, took his time, clicked the pen twice. Then he looked up with that same cold smile. Step outside, please, both of you. Malcolm's hand was still on Elijah's arm. He could feel his brother's pulse through the fabric, fast, hard, like a man using every ounce of control not to explode. Outside, Crawford repeated. Now! I'm not going to ask again. Malcolm took a breath, looked at his half-eaten breakfast, looked at the silent diner full of silent people. Then he slid out of the booth. Elijah followed. The bell rang above the door as they walked out into the parking lot. The morning sun was bright. The gravel crunched under their shoes. And behind them, through the window, a dozen faces watched. And not one of them did a single thing. The parking lot of Loretta's Griddle was just gravel and sun. No shade, no breeze. The kind of heat that sits on your neck and stays there. Crawford pointed at his cruiser. Hands on the hood, both of you. Malcolm didn't move right away. Officer, I want to be clear. We've committed no crime. We were eating breakfast. And now you're being asked to cooperate with a law enforcement officer. Hands on the hood. Malcolm looked at Elijah, gave him one small nod. The same nod their father used to give them before church. Chin down, eyes steady. It meant, do what you have to do, but don't lose yourself. They walked to the cruiser, placed their palms flat on the hood. The metal was already baking under the Virginia sun. Malcolm could feel the heat searing into his skin. He didn't pull away. Crawford stepped behind Malcolm first. Spread your feet. He patted Malcolm down like he was searching a suspect after a drug raid. Rough, deliberate. Hands pressing hard into ribs, running down both legs, squeezing pockets. He pulled out Malcolm's phone, looked at it, set it on the hood, pulled out a leather wallet, flipped through it again even though he'd already seen the ID. Then he moved to Elijah. Same thing. Slower this time, making a show of it. Through the diner window, faces were still watching. A man in a red cap, Loretta with her towel, the older couple frozen in their booth like mannequins. Two black men, palms flat on a hot cruiser, being searched in broad daylight in front of an audience that refused to blink. Crawford stepped back and nodded at Brennan. Check the vehicle. Brennan walked straight to the gray Nissan, opened the driver's side door without asking. Malcolm turned his head. I do not consent to this search. Noted, Crawford said. Didn't even look at him. Brennan popped the glove box, pulled out the rental agreement, tossed it on the seat. Then he moved to the back seat, looked under the floor mats, ran his hand between the cushions like he was looking for drugs or weapons or anything that would justify what they were doing. He found nothing, because there was nothing to find. Then he opened the trunk. Inside was a single black leather briefcase. Professional, clean, the kind that costs more than Brennan's weekly paycheck. Next to it, a garment bag with a pressed suit inside. Next to that, a small box of business cards. Brennan pulled the briefcase out and brought it to Crawford like a dog bringing a bone to its owner. Crawford unclipped the latch. Inside were legal files, folders, printed memos on thick paper with headers that read, United States Department of Justice. A leather-bound notebook with the DOJ seal embossed in gold on the cover. Crawford flipped through the papers the way a bored student flips through a textbook, fast, careless, not reading a single word. He held up one of the folders. What's all this? You some kind of paralegal? Malcolm said nothing. Maybe a law student? Crawford smiled. Or wait, let me guess. You watch a lot of legal shows and bought yourself a fancy briefcase to feel important. Brennan laughed, the kind of laugh that comes from wanting your boss to like you. Malcolm said nothing. He kept his palms flat on the hood, his eyes fixed on the middle distance. The heat from the metal was turning his skin red. Sweat ran down the side of his neck. A fly landed on his wrist. He didn't move. Crawford tossed the folder back into the briefcase and dropped it on the gravel. Papers spilled out. The DOJ seal caught the sunlight for a second before a page settled face down in the dust. Boy. That word. That one word. Crawford said it the way certain men in certain towns have said it for 100 years. Not loud, not shouted, just dropped, flat and heavy, like a boot on someone's throat. Boy, you sure are quiet all of a sudden. What happened to all that legal talk in the diner? Malcolm didn't answer. His jaw was set. The muscles in his forearms were tight as cable wire, but his hands stayed flat. His breathing stayed even. Crawford leaned in close. So close, Malcolm could hear the leather of his belt creaking. I'm going to tell you something, and I want you to really hear it. I've been doing this 22 years. 22 years keeping this town clean. And it's always the same story with you people. You show up where you don't belong, you cause problems, and then you cry about your rights. He stepped back, spit on the gravel next to Malcolm's shoe. Run them both for warrants, he told Brennan. Take your time. Brennan walked back to the cruiser to use the computer. Crawford leaned against the diner wall, arms crossed, coffee in hand. Like a man watching a show he'd seen 100 times and never got tired of. That's when Elijah broke. Not physically, he didn't swing. He didn't run. But his voice cracked open like something that had been held shut too long. This is wrong. Elijah's voice was shaking, not from fear, from the kind of anger that sits in your chest and burns. We were eating breakfast, pancakes, that's it. You can't do this to people. Crawford pushed off the wall, walked toward Elijah with slow, heavy steps. Got close, too close. Finger pointed right at Elijah's face. One more word, one, and I'll have you in cuffs. Resisting, obstruction, disorderly, pick your favorite. I've got all day. Elijah's hands were shaking against the hood, not from fear, from years. Years of being followed in stores, years of being pulled over for driving a nice car, years of watching his brother work twice as hard as everyone in the room and still get questioned at the door. "You're recording this, aren't you?" Crawford suddenly said. He'd noticed the slight angle of Elijah's body, the way his pocket was facing outward. "Give me that phone." "I have a legal right to—" "You have a legal right to do exactly what I tell you. Hand it over." Elijah didn't. He pressed his arm against his pocket instead, keeping the phone where it was. Crawford stared at him, then made a decision. Not worth the fight. Not yet. He turned back to Malcolm instead, grabbed the business cards from the trunk box, read one out loud. "Malcolm Owens." He flicked the card into the dirt. "Must be real important. Got yourself business cards and everything." He didn't read the title printed below the name. A couple walked out of the diner. The woman glanced at the two black men on the cruiser hood, the deputies standing over them, the papers in the dirt. She grabbed her husband's arm and pulled him toward their truck. They drove away without looking back. Brennan came back from the computer. Both clean, no warrants, no priors, nothing. Crawford didn't react, didn't apologize, didn't step back. He just took a sip of his coffee and stared at Malcolm like the results were an inconvenience. "I still don't like it," Crawford said quietly. "Something about this doesn't sit right." Nothing about this sat right, but not in the way Crawford meant. And right about now, about 14 minutes and 30 seconds since Malcolm had asked his security detail to hang back, those 15 minutes were almost up. Malcolm heard it before he saw it. A low rumble, deep, the kind of sound that doesn't come from one engine. It comes from 6, rolling in sync, getting louder every second. Crawford heard it too. His coffee mug stopped halfway to his mouth. From the exit ramp, a black Chevrolet Suburban turned into view. Tinted windows so dark they looked painted shut. Government plates, 2 antennas on the roof. Then a second, then a third, then a fourth, then the 5th and 6th, rolling in tight formation like a convoy that had done this 1,000 times before. They turned into the gravel lot of Loretta's Griddle. Not fast, not rushed. The kind of slow that says we don't need to hurry. The first Suburban parked directly behind Crawford's cruiser, blocked it in. The rest spread across the lot like a net closing shut. Nobody was leaving without permission. Engines cut at the same time, all 6. The silence after was louder than the rumble before. Crawford's hand moved to his holster. His eyes were jumping. Left, right, left, trying to count doors, trying to figure out what the hell was happening in his quiet little town on a Tuesday morning. Brennan had backed up against the cruiser. His face had gone the color of old milk. His hand hovered over his radio, but he didn't press the button. He didn't know who to call. He didn't know if calling would make things better or 1,000 times worse. "What the hell is this?" Crawford whispered. The authority was gone. What came out was thin, hollow, the voice of a man who just realized he was standing in the middle of something much bigger than himself. 12 doors opened at once. The sound, 12 handles, 12 hinges, 12 boots hitting gravel in near-perfect rhythm, was something neither deputy would ever forget. Out stepped 12 U.S. Marshals, some in tactical vests with yellow letters across the chest, some in dark suits with earpieces coiled behind their ears, all armed, all moving with the kind of calm that comes from people who walk into situations worse than this before breakfast. They fanned out across the lot without a single word. 2 moved behind Crawford. 1 stood next to Brennan. 2 positioned themselves on either side of the cruiser. The rest formed a loose perimeter around the diner entrance. Nobody spoke. Nobody needed to. Leading them was a woman, black, early 30s, hair pulled back tight, badge on her hip, eyes that had already assessed every threat in the lot before her second boot hit the gravel. Special Agent Dana Sutton. She walked past Crawford like he was a parking meter, didn't look at him, didn't acknowledge his badge, his uniform, or his existence. Walked straight to the hood of the cruiser where Malcolm was still standing with raw palms and dust on his shirt. "Mr. Owens, We lost you after the highway split. Are you all right, sir? Sir. That word landed like a bomb with no explosion. Just silence and shrapnel flying in every direction. Crawford's mouth fell open. Actually fell open. Like a hinge had broken somewhere in his jaw. Malcolm pushed himself off the hood, rolled his shoulders, flexed his fingers. The skin on his palms was bright red from 15 minutes on burning metal. He gave Sutton one small nod. I'm fine, Agent Sutton. These deputies were just checking on us. The way he said it, calm, almost gentle, like a man offering someone one last chance to understand how badly they've miscalculated. Sutton turned around. For the first time, she looked at Crawford, the way a surgeon looks at a scan that's already confirmed the worst. Not with anger, not with pity, with the detached, clinical focus of someone who knows exactly what she's looking at and exactly what happens next. I'm Special Agent Dana Sutton, United States Marshals Service. She held her badge at Crawford's eye level, steady, close enough to read every engraved word. Kept it there for 3 full seconds. The counting felt intentional. You are currently detaining Malcolm Owens, the newly confirmed United States Attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia. She let that sentence hang in the air like a grenade with the pin already pulled. Didn't follow it with anything, didn't need to. The words did their own work, sinking into Crawford like water into dry earth. Slow at first, then all at once. Crawford blinked, mouth open, close, like a man underwater trying to breathe. Brennan's voice cracked from behind the cruiser. Crawford, who is this guy? Crawford didn't answer, couldn't answer. His eyes were darting. Sutton, Malcolm, the 12 marshals positioned around the lot like chess pieces that had already won the game. 2 of them stood directly behind him. He could feel them without turning around. Step back from Mr. Owens. Sutton's voice dropped half an octave. Now. That wasn't a request, wasn't a suggestion. It was the kind of sentence that comes with a period so heavy it dents the ground. Crawford stepped back. His boot caught on the gravel and he stumbled half a step. The man who had been puffing his chest and spitting on the ground and calling grown men boy 5 minutes ago just tripped over his own feet trying to back away from a woman half his age. Inside the diner, every face was pressed against the glass. Loretta had both hands over her mouth. The trucker in the red cap had his phone out, recording through the window. The older couple, the ones who'd pretended to read their menus 3 times, were standing now, watching, like the whole world had flipped and they were seeing it right side up for the first time. Malcolm straightened his shirt, slowly, brushed the dust off his sleeves, walked to the spot where Crawford had thrown his briefcase, got down on one knee, gathered the scattered papers one by one, the DOJ letterhead, the legal files, the business cards that had been flicked into the dirt. He stacked them neatly, placed them back inside, closed the latch with a soft click. Then he stood up straight, squared his shoulders, and for the first time since he walked into Loretta's griddle that morning, he spoke with the full weight of who he was. Deputy, your full name and badge number. Crawford's voice came out like something scraped from the bottom of a dry well. Russell Crawford. Badge 412. Deputy Crawford. Was this search conducted with a warrant? Silence. Just the sound of a man breathing too fast through his nose. Did you have probable cause to detain us? Silence. The break-ins you cited, the ones you used to justify everything that happened in that diner and in this parking lot, were those real? Will I find them in your dispatch records when I pull them this afternoon? Crawford's eyes dropped to the gravel. His lips moved like they were trying to form words, but every word he'd ever relied on, the authority, the threats, the commands, none of them worked anymore. They were all useless now, every single one. Malcolm nodded slowly, the nod of a man who already knew the answer before he asked the question. That's what I thought. He turned to Elijah. His brother was standing very still by the cruiser, tears running down his face. Not sad tears, not scared tears. the kind that come when something you've carried in your chest your whole life, something that started before you were old enough to understand it, is finally, for once, seen by somebody else. "Show them," Malcolm said quietly. Elijah reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, held it up so the screen faced outward. A recording, 43 minutes long and still running, the timer ticking in the corner, every word captured, every shove, every slur, the pat-down on the burning hood, the illegal search, the papers thrown in the dirt. Animals, boy, cages, food stamps, your kind. All of it. Full audio, full video, nothing missing, nothing cut. Malcolm looked at Crawford one last time. The deputy was standing in the middle of his own parking lot, surrounded by 12 federal agents, stripped of every ounce of power he'd spent 22 years believing was his by right. Everything that happened today, in that diner and in this parking lot, will be reviewed by my office, every second of it. Crawford stood perfectly still, sun on his face, sweat pooling in his collar. 12 marshals around him in a circle that felt like it was shrinking with every breath, and the slow, sickening realization spreading through his body, bone by bone, nerve by nerve, that the worst morning of his life was only the beginning. Crawford's mouth started moving before his brain caught up. "Sir, Mr. Owens, I was just doing my job. We had reports of—" There were no reports. Malcolm's voice cut clean through the air. No anger, no shouting, just fact. "I will be confirming that with your dispatch records by this afternoon, and we both already know what I'm going to find." Crawford swallowed. His throat bobbed like a man trying to keep something down that was already on its way up. I didn't know who you were. If I had known—" "Stop!" Malcolm held up one hand. "That, right there, that is exactly the problem." He took one step closer, not aggressive, not threatening, just close enough that Crawford had nowhere to look but straight into his eyes. "You didn't stop us because of break-ins that don't exist. You didn't search our car because of probable cause you never had. You did it because two black men walked into a diner in your town and you decided, before we even opened our mouths, that we didn't belong." Malcolm paused. Let the silence do the work. "You're telling me if you'd known I was a U.S. attorney, this wouldn't have happened? That's not a defense, Deputy. That's a confession. Because it means the only thing protecting a black man from you is a title, and most people don't have one." Crawford's face was gray, not red, not flushed. Gray. The color a man turns when he realizes the ground beneath him is already gone and he's just been standing on air. He opened his mouth one more time. "I'm sorry. Save it for the investigation." Sutton was already moving. She stepped between Malcolm and Crawford and addressed two of her marshals. "Secure his body cam footage, right now. I want the memory card pulled and logged before we leave this lot." One marshal moved to Crawford. "Your body camera, Deputy." Crawford's hand fumbled at his chest. He unclipped the camera and handed it over like a man handing over a piece of himself. Sutton keyed her radio. "Dispatch, Sutton, USMS. I need the Barlow County Sheriff to report to Loretta's Griddle on Route 58. Immediately." She turned to Crawford. "Your service weapon and your badge. Standard protocol pending a federal review of this incident." Crawford stared at her. For a moment it looked like he might argue, might say something about his rights, his authority, his 22 years. But there were 12 marshals in that parking lot, and every single one of them was watching him. He unholstered his weapon, placed it on the hood of his own cruiser, the same hood he'd forced Malcolm onto 15 minutes ago. Then he unpinned his badge, held it in his palm for a second, looked at it like a man looking at a photograph of someone who just died. He set it next to the gun. Brennan had been standing by the cruiser the whole time, silent, pale, trying to be invisible, which is hard to do when you're wearing a uniform. He raised both hands slightly. "I was just following his lead. I wasn't the one who—" Sutton didn't let him finish. "You participated in an unlawful detention. You conducted a warrantless search of a federal official's vehicle. You will be named in the report." Brennan's mouth closed. His hands dropped. He looked at Crawford for help, for guidance, for anything. Crawford didn't look back. Crawford was staring at the ground like a man who had just watched his whole life fall through a crack in the earth. Both deputies were separated. Crawford was placed in the back of one Suburban, Brennan in another. Not arrested, not yet, but removed from the scene, stripped of authority, and surrounded by people whose authority made theirs look like a hall pass. The bell above the diner door jingled. Loretta Gibbons stepped outside. She was trembling. Her hands were clasped together like she was trying to hold herself in one piece. "Mr. Owens," her voice was thin, shaky. "I'm sorry. I should have said something. I saw the whole thing and I just stood there." Malcolm looked at her, not with anger, not with pity, something in between. "There's going to be an investigation, ma'am. You can still do the right thing. Tell the truth." Loretta nodded fast. Small nods, like she was convincing herself as much as agreeing. "My diner has security cameras," she said. "Inside and outside. I'll give you everything." Malcolm nodded. That would help. She went back inside. Through the window, Malcolm could see her leaning against the counter, wiping her eyes with the same dish towel she'd been wringing all morning. The footage hit the internet before sundown. Elijah uploaded his 43-minute recording to social media that evening. He didn't add music, didn't add a caption, didn't add commentary, just the raw video. Shaky at first, the angle from inside his pocket, then steady once he'd pulled it out in the parking lot. Every word in full, every action in frame. Within 6 hours, it had 800,000 views. By morning, 4 million. By the end of the week, the number stopped mattering because every major news outlet in the country had picked it up. Boy, Cage is where you actually belong. Your kind. Food stamps, welfare check. Those words, Crawford's words, became headlines, screenshots, hashtags, sound bites played on loop across every cable news channel from CNN to Fox. But the footage from inside the diner was what broke people. Loretta's security cameras had captured everything from a second angle. The moment Crawford walked up to the booth, the moment he leaned over Malcolm's plate, the coffee being shoved off the table, the ceramics shattering on the floor. And the faces, every single face in that diner, looking down, looking away, pretending they couldn't see what was happening 3 feet in front of them. That footage turned Loretta's Griddle into the most recognized diner in America overnight. Angela Whitmore, a reporter at the regional NBC affiliate, broke the full story first. Her segment ran 11 minutes, long for local news. She'd done something the Barlow County Sheriff's Office had never bothered to do. She'd made phone calls, knocked on doors, sat in living rooms with a camera and a notepad and listened. What she found was a pattern. 6 people came forward in the first week. Black and Latino residents of Barlow County who had filed formal complaints against Deputy Russell Crawford over the past 8 years. Every single one described the same playbook: fabricated pretexts, illegal searches, racial slurs, intimidation. One man, a black truck driver named Gerald, described being pulled over 4 times in 2 months on the same road. Each time Crawford searched his cab. Each time he found nothing. Each time Gerald filed a complaint. Nothing ever happened. Not once. Because every complaint landed on the same desk, Sheriff Wade Prescott's desk. The investigation expanded fast. Malcolm's office, the U.S. Attorney's Eastern District, immediately recused itself from the case. Conflict of interest. The matter was referred to the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division in Washington. Within 72 hours, federal investigators were in Barlow. They pulled 14 complaints from the department's internal files. 14, spanning 8 years, all against Crawford, all signed, dated, documented, and all marked with the same handwritten note in the margin: N.F.A. No further action. Every single one initialed by Sheriff Wade Prescott. Prescott made a mistake on day 4. He held a press conference. He stood behind a wooden podium with the Barlow County seal and told reporters that Crawford was a dedicated officer with a spotless record who had been unfairly targeted by a politically motivated attack. He called the viral video one-sided and said the department would conduct its own internal review. The clip went viral for all the wrong reasons. Prescott's dismissive tone, the smirk that flashed across his face when a reporter asked about the buried complaints, the way he said, "These things get exaggerated," while adjusting his hat like he was brushing off a fly. Public outrage went from a fire to an inferno. Protest signs appeared outside the Barlow County Sheriff's Office within 48 hours. Civil rights organizations issued public statements. 3 members of the Virginia State Legislature called for Prescott's resignation. A petition demanding a federal investigation gathered 200,000 signatures in 5 days. The DOJ didn't need a petition. They were already moving. A federal grand jury was convened in Richmond. Prescott was indicted on 2 counts, obstruction of justice and civil rights violations under a pattern of deliberate indifference. Prosecutors argued he had knowingly and systematically suppressed evidence of racial discrimination within his department for nearly a decade. Crawford's charges were heavier. Deprivation of rights under color of law, 18 U.S.C. Section 242. Unlawful search and seizure, false imprisonment, filing a false police report, the fabricated break-ins he'd used as a pretext to detain Malcolm and Elijah. The trial took place in federal court in Richmond. It lasted 9 days. The prosecution's case was airtight. Elijah's recording was played in full. The diner security footage was projected on a 12-foot screen. Dispatch logs were entered into evidence confirming zero reported burglaries in Barlow County for the month of September. 6 former victims testified in person. Gerald, the truck driver, spoke for 22 minutes. He cried twice. The jury didn't look away. Crawford's defense attorney tried the only angle he had. Routine procedure. Officer discretion. Reasonable suspicion based on unfamiliar individuals in a high-risk area. The prosecution asked one question in rebuttal. Deputy Crawford, in your 22 years of service, can you name a single white motorist you detained at Loretta's Griddle for being unfamiliar? Crawford sat in silence for 11 seconds. The courtroom counted every one. No, he said finally. I cannot. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty. All counts. The judge, a 61-year-old woman who had spent 30 years on the federal bench, delivered the sentence without raising her voice. Crawford, 60 months in federal prison, a lifetime ban from law enforcement, mandatory restitution to Malcolm and Elijah Owens and to every victim whose complaint was buried. Brennan pleaded guilty to a reduced charge before trial. 18 months. Immediate termination from the department. Prescott's trial came 2 months later. Shorter, less dramatic, but no less damning. The buried complaints spoke for themselves. 14 files, 14 families, 14 times justice was crumpled up and tossed in a drawer. Guilty, obstruction of justice, 36 months. The case triggered something larger. The Department of Justice issued a consent decree over the entire Barlow County Sheriff's Office, the first in the state in over a decade. Mandatory body camera policies, independent civilian review of all complaints, bias training, quarterly federal audits. Malcolm held a press conference on the courthouse steps the day the decree was announced. He stood at the microphone in the same suit he'd packed in that garment bag, the one Brennan had unzipped in the trunk of a rental car on a gravel lot outside a pancake diner. This case is not about one deputy, Malcolm said. His voice was steady. His eyes were clear. It's about what happens when a community accepts silence as normal, when complaints disappear, when people look down at their plates because it's easier than looking up. That silence is not neutral. It is permission. The cameras flashed. The quote made the front page of 4 national newspapers the next morning. 6 months later, Loretta's Griddle was still open. The diner had become something nobody expected. A symbol. Not because of what happened inside it, but because of what Loretta did after. She testified. She handed over every second of footage without a subpoena. She showed up at Crawford's trial on the first day and sat in the third row until the verdict was read. She couldn't undo the silence, but she refused to stay in it. The week after the trial, she hung a framed copy of the Fourth Amendment next to the register, right between the specials board and a photo of her late husband. She didn't make a speech about it, didn't post it online. A regular noticed it and asked what it was. "A reminder," Loretta said, "for me." Business actually went up. People drove from 3 counties over just to eat at the diner they saw on the news. Some came for the pancakes. Most came because they wanted to sit in the booth by the window, the one where 2 black men had been told they didn't belong, and eat a meal in peace. Malcolm's first year as U.S. Attorney became one of the most talked about in the district's history. He launched a civil rights enforcement initiative across the Eastern District of Virginia. New task force, new reporting channels, a direct line for citizens to file complaints that couldn't be buried by a local sheriff with a pen in a drawer. He never spoke publicly about what happened at Loretta's Griddle beyond that single press conference. When reporters asked for interviews, follow-ups, book deals, he declined every one. "The case speaks for itself," he said. "I'd rather build systems than tell stories." But Elijah told the story, over and over. He went back to coaching football in North Carolina. The week he returned, his players had already seen the video, every single one. They had questions, hard ones, the kind of questions teenagers ask when they're old enough to be angry but not yet old enough to know what to do with it. So Elijah started a new tradition. Every Friday before practice, 15 minutes, know your rights. He'd sit on the bleachers with his players and walk through the basics. When can an officer search your car? When can you refuse? How to record? How to stay calm when every cell in your body is telling you not to? "I'm not teaching you to fight cops," Elijah told them. "I'm teaching you to survive encounters with bad ones. There's a difference, and you need to know it before you drive home tonight." The 6 victims, the ones whose complaints Prescott had buried, received formal apologies from the county. Written, signed, public. Each one also received a financial settlement. It wasn't enough. It's never enough. But it was something. It was proof, on paper, that what happened to them was real, and that someone in power finally admitted it. Gerald, the truck driver, framed his apology letter and hung it on the wall of his cab. When people asked why, he said the same thing every time. 20 years I've been driving this route. 20 years I've been telling people what that deputy did to me. 20 years nobody believed me. Now they do. And that's the part that should bother you most, because in this story, justice showed up. It showed up in 6 black SUVs with government plates and federal badges. It showed up because Malcolm Owens happened to be someone with power. Someone with a title, someone whose phone call gets returned in 5 minutes. But what about the people who don't have that? What about the man at the diner who doesn't have 12 marshals 15 minutes behind him? What about the kid driving home from practice who gets pulled over on a back road with no cameras, no witnesses, no 43-minute recording? What happens to them? Crawford didn't see a U.S. attorney that morning. He saw 2 black men and decided they didn't belong. The badge, the title, the SUVs. None of that should have been necessary for 2 men to eat breakfast in peace. None of it. And until the day it isn't necessary, until the day a man can order pancakes without proving he's powerful enough to be treated like a human being, we haven't finished the work. Not even close. So here's my question for you. If Malcolm Owens had been just a regular guy that morning, no title, no security detail, no 6 black SUVs, how does this story end? Drop your answer in the comments. I want to hear it. And if this story made you feel something, anything, share it. Send it to someone. Because somewhere right now, somebody needs to hear this and know they're not imagining things. Like, subscribe, hit that bell. Every story we tell on this channel is about one thing: The moment when the truth finally catches up. And trust me, it always does.
Crawford, 16 months in federal prison. Prescott, 36. Brandon took a plea. 18, every badge gone. But here's what stays with me. Crawford didn't stop when he saw the DOG briefcase. He threw it in the dirt. He didn't stop when Malcolm knew the law better than he did. He called him boy. He only stopped when 6 black SUVs rolled into that parking lot. Not when he saw a human being, when he saw power. And that's the real story here. Malcolm didn't get treated like a person because he deserved it. He got treated like a person because he had 12 marshals behind him. The respect wasn't for the man, it was for the title. And most people don't carry a title to break first. So ask yourself this. When does a man earn the right to eat pancakes in peace? When he passes a Senate confirmation, or when he walks through the door? And if you were sitting in that dinner, watching it all happen 3 feet away, would you have been the one who spoke up, or the one who looked down at your plate? Jot your answer in the comments. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs it. Like, subscribe, hit the bell. Every story on this channel is about one thing. The moment truth catches up, and it always does.